I see team opposition here. We're waiting for proposition team to arrive. Okay, I see that both names are here. First of all, I'll present myself. I'm Miriana, and I'll be judging this debate with Valeria Sturniolo, Andrea Zoia, Paolo De Maria, and Letizia Bellello. So we'll be very happy to judge this debate. I'll just lay some ground rule. First of all, as you know, the bell will sound at 1 minute, 7 minutes, and 2 times at 8 minutes. The reply speeches it will sound at 3 minutes and 2 times at 4 minutes. At 8:15 minutes, I will start taking notes. And for all of the people that are watching this debate, please do not engage, do not talk during the debate, so that us judges and the debaters can follow the debate easily. And having said that, I will just read the motion, and then I'll ask you guys your names for first speaker, second speaker, and so on. The motion for today's, as you guys know, is: this House believes that fear is a legitimate tool for installing moral values. Having said that, now I'll ask you guys for your names, starting with proposition, first speaker.
Good afternoon, Honorable Judge at your obstetric. Good afternoon, America Galante.
Okay, second speaker from proposition team.
Hi, I'm Francesco, and I will be the second speaker from proposition team.
Okay, perfect. And now third speaker.
Here, General Robel, third speaker.
Okay, for what regards the reply?
I will be carrying out the reply.
Okay.
Francesco.
Okay, same things for opposition, first speaker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Megle.
Okay, perfect. Second speaker.
Good evening, I'm Ante Insano.
Okay. Third speaker.
Good evening, I'm Angelo Domarchio, and I'm the third speaker.
Okay, for opposition team, if it interrupts the connection and the sound, you can leave the meet from the computer that sees you from the back, like the other computer, not the one you're talking, if you have a problem with the sound. Okay. So for what regards the reply?
I'm going to do the reply.
Okay. So if all of the judges are ready, we can start. Without any further ado, please take the floor, first speaker from proposition.
Honorable Judge, dear opposite team, good afternoon, America Galante, and I'm the first first affirmative speaker in this debate. First of all, let me briefly explain what some terms of the motion means and why it's important. The first theme I'm going to analyze is fear. Fear is an emotion or a biological instinct and tell us that something is wrong and prevent us from doing something in a rush. The second term I'm going to analyze is instilling, and is a verb and means that makes a person accept their values. So it makes them accept their values and their ethical comportment. Then I'm going to explain moral values that are principles accepted that are justifiable with a logical reasoning and that are fundamental in an ethical comportment. As the first speaker of my team, I will present our main arguments and support them with examples and evidence. The first main point is that fear can be a set of brakes from committing inconsiderate action. The second point is that fear brings a logical reasoning. Fear is it makes it accept these values our own. And the third point is that fear brings about a logical reasoning that brought global human progress. Fear is a legitimate tool for instilling moral values because it makes us accept these values as our own completely. But be careful, we are not saying that fear should be used exclusively to instilling moral values, but this is legitimate to use it for moral values that have a logical reasoning. I'm going to explain that fear can be perceived as a group of bricks that can stop us from doing illogical actions that can lead to devastating consequences. In a world where social tensions and issues are rampant, it is fundamental to use as many tools as possible to have people understanding what is right and what is wrong. So let's start with an example. We are from a view of a child, and this child has to learn the main importance of the devastating consequences that his actions can have. So, if the father is explaining to the child that he doesn't have to rob or that he doesn't have to kill someone, he won't understand the things with a following reasoning, so step by step, but he will understand the devastating consequences with feeling a sense of fear. So our value is to have a better and more efficient comprehension that can lead us to understand what is right and what is wrong. So we're also going to explain the main things that that fear can lead to. So fear can also have a positive impact on a person because it makes the people understand the important decisions that they are making. And I think that it is essential to understand what we are making, so we want to make mistakes. As we say to the example, I think that it's very, very important to let the children know what is good and what is bad, because if we don't teach to the youngest what is happening in the world, they won't be able to understand the consequences of the action. And also they can be able to justify their actions in the future. I also believe that if they are very, very brave, they can also understand the importance that fear isn't just a bad emotion, but it is also a force that can make them to go through the negatives, the negative impacts that they can face. So if So if they can, but this speech can't be amplified not just to kids, but also to adults, because if an adult doesn't know what his actions are, what his actions does, what his action do, they won't be able to teach those things to the children. So I think that both children and adults should know what they are doing. And also they should know that if they robber, they are going to teach this action to their children, to their sons, and to their daughters. And I think that the fear is also a value that is not also an emotion, but is also a biological instinct that everyone faces every day, because it can prevent us from doing something bad, like, as I said, robbery or killing someone. Because if we teach the children to kill someone, they won't be able to understand these important values. Also, moral values needs to be teach them from their parents to their sons, so they are going to understand the real values that are going to create their ethical comportment. And this also leads to a society where people are going to understand what is good and what is bad. So I think that they also need to understand the real causes of our society. Also, the other two speakers are going to explain they are going to explain the values that fear has in children and adults, and the logical reasoning that it can bring to our society.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. It lasted 7 minutes and 22 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
So when the judges are ready, they can give me like a heads up so we can go on. Okay, so if all of the judges are ready, we can move on to the first speech from opposition team, which will be from Egle.
Okay, so honorable judges, worthy opponents, esteemed audience, good evening. I'm Egle, and we heard that the motion from today's debate is fear is a legitimate tool for instilling moral values. But are we sure this is really a good thing? So we are on the opposing side of this motion, and we strongly believe that this motion is not right. Fear is one of the most primordial and spontaneous feelings that helps our ancestors surviving. It should not be exploited to impose values that are different from everyone. So everyone can find moral values in different things. So we cannot think that moral values are from everyone. Yes?
Aren't you aware that the majority of times fear can also be accompanied by logical reasonings that are indeed true?
Sorry, can you repeat? Sorry, I don't understand this.
Aren't you aware of the fact that fear many times can be accompanied by true logical reasonings? Are you aware of that?
We can be aware of that, but I think that it doesn't lead to society that understand, but a society that is constantly controlled by fear. So then fear it's not should be exploited to use values that are different so for everyone. The point that we are going to discuss to support our to provide this emotion is wrong are the death penalty, the fear that doesn't make people assimilate values, and moral values are different from everyone. To begin, let's consider the death penalty. The greatest fears of humans is surely the death. A lot of states in the world support the death penalty. And this is used to instilling values on the population by using fear. This made a complex mechanism called politics of fear that impose a certain legislation that everyone has to submit to if they want to survive. This is one of the most outrageous thing that our society is using to instilling moral values. So using fear is never a right thing, especially to impose moral values. This method was used on ancient times. However, in our society, that is an evoluted society, should be surpassed by other ways of punishing crimes, like rehab. It's important not to using this fear to impose certain things that are not for everyone. And it's important not to use these types of things to grow a new society, such as we heard that children must have a figure that grows them with fear. But this is not a point that we can support in our society. Nowadays, it's important to grow children in families that must not support fear. Instead, they must support the speaking with others, staying in contact with the good things, and the respect. That it's one of the most important thing that we can use to impose moral values. So one of the other things that we heard is that fear is a bad emotion, but it can be a force. This house believes that it's not a force that can be used, because there are lots of other forces, such as talking and with each other, that it's a lot of it's better instead of using fear. Then in this in our society, it's important to support one of the most important base that is the respect. Respect is not linked with fear, and it's another force that can be used instead of fear to impose moral values. And I think that that's all. And
Okay, so thank you so much for that fine speech. It lasted 7 minutes and 21 seconds. Okay, so if all the judges are ready, we can move on to the second speech from proposition team.
Okay, just 1 second. I will just sum up my points and I will start, okay? My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. Winston Churchill. Hi, everyone, honorable judges and members of this debate. I am Francesco, and I will be the second speaker for proposition team. Well, let's start first of all by saying some things, by spending some time on some things that the opposing team has told you about our motion. Well, first of all, let's say that they are completely living in a world which is not in a world which is without any logical reasoning, because as we have said, in a world where social tensions and issues are rampant, it is fundamental to use as many tools as possible to make people understand what is right and what is wrong. And that inextricably links us to our main value. The main value of our side is that we have to lead people to a better comprehension and a more efficient comprehension of what is right and what is wrong on a large scale. That is why we have reiterated in our key terms that moral values are principles that are accepted by an amount of people that are justifiable with also a reasoning. And instilling, it means makes people accept our values. Okay, well, now let's first of all move on to the refutation of the points made by the opposing team. Well, first of all, they said that we are living in a world where fear governs everything, which is completely false. As we have said, we want to live in a world where fear leads everything, which is completely false. Okay, I will accept the PI.
Okay, so you said that basically fear is a tool, but someone imposing values with fear as their principal tool is basically a dictator. So do you support dictator by saying that?
Well, that is exactly the points that doesn't make our argumentations fall, because we are not saying that we want to instill moral values just based on fear. We want to instill moral values, okay, legitimizing fear, which does not mean in any case that fear should be used exclusively, as the first speaker of our team has said. Indeed, as we will prove to you in our argumentations, fear can be used as a plus, as something more to make people understand why these moral values are indeed good moral values. The problem with your thinking about our thesis is that you think that we are going to use fear exclusively, and that of course would make us a dictatorship. But we are just saying, as the motion itself is saying, this house believes that fear is a legitimate tool, which does not mean that it should be used anytime. Indeed, we have said that our moral values should be values that are moral and that are justifiable with also a reasoning, that are not just something random. Okay, now let's move on to what the opposing team has said about our argumentations. Well, as I was saying before, they say that we want to live in a world where only fear rules everything. However, as we have said, we are just going to make fear a legitimate tool, a tool that can be used, but that does not mean that it will be used at any time. It will be used every time. Okay. Now they have said, first of all, something about the death penalty, because they say that with the death penalty, some governments are trying to convince people with fear that some actions are bad. Well, that is exactly the case when that is exactly the case that does not make our argument fall, because the death penalty is illogical. It is well, let's say it is a policy that leads to a moral value that is illogical, because it makes us understand that we should not do something wrong. However, it does not explain logically why the death penalty is going to be beneficial. Whereas with illogical reasoning, it would be better to let's say, it would be better to make people understand that our actions are bad through, as you have said, a process of making that person understand that thing. For example, by making him go to jail, making him go to rehab, and other policies like this. So you are, first of all, basically attacking our argumentations based on a law, not on a moral value, which is completely, does not get the point of our argument. Now, let's move on to what you have said. In your opinion, we are saying that children should have a figure that makes them grow just with fear. However, you are completely strawmanning your arguments, because we have never said that an adult figure that cares about a child should just care about him, should just teach him things based on fear. He teaches him the consequences of his actions. And those very consequences are the ones that make a bit of fear grow into that youngling, into that child. And that is why we were saying in the first argument that it is a break from committing inconsiderate actions, especially we are talking especially about the case where there is fear and where there is an impossibility for logic. Because as we are saying, a child he is a child, he does not have the power as an adult to reason on things. So when there is no logic, fear is a good thing, because for a start, for that moment, temporarily, it serves as a break. Now, through our series of argumentations, we will go through the case when there is no logic and there is fear, when there is both logic and fear, and the ultimate case where fear itself brings to a logical reasoning. Now, let's move on to the second argumentation. Fear is a legitimate tool because it makes us accept those moral values as our own. Because first of all, let's say that there is a value about something that we believe is indeed bad. For example, let's start with homicides. Many people, of course, know that homicides are bad, and they have the fear that some person might go and kill them on the street. And of course, they can support with logic why killing is bad, because you're basically ending the life of a person. You're basically cutting away the freedom of life from that person. But fear makes us accept those values even more, because there is a guts feeling in ourselves that accompanies the logical reasoning that we are trying to commit. So in the end, that moral value will have more, let's say, value, sorry for the game of words, because it can be at the same time supported by fear and by logical reasoning. So it has two sides of the same medal. Okay, now let's move on to the third argument. Fear brings about logical explanations. Why? Because fear can at first block us. However, then it can help us have some time to think about the things that we want. For example, about the bad consequences of our actions. First of all, it makes us understand really our actions. It makes us understand them completely, and it gives us the possibility through time to understand what the wrongdoing of something by not doing that action. So it's basically giving us a gift. Those moral values that are based on fear are basically helping us in understanding that an action is bad, and at the same time not committing that action, so not having the risk of suffering from the consequence of that action in the first place. Okay, and that is why, as I have said before, this has a huge impact on the whole of society, because the more we instill these reasoning into other people, the more we are going to solve the problems of internal, let's say, unrest that might go into them. That's why we support fear as a legitimate tool for moral values that are logical, not the fear that they are trying to tell us. Okay, with that being said, I have concluded my speech, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. It lasted 8 minutes and 4 seconds. Okay, we can move on to the second speech from opposition team.
I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, good evening, honorable judges, opponents, and audience. I will commence by considering what the proposition said. So, the proposition said that there are lots of tools and fear does not have to be one. We all strongly believe that there are other methods to impose something, to make someone believe something, to teach something. And fear is the last one that should be used. Why? Because it should not be legitimate in a modern society. As we said before, we have modern tools. Because there is other points that why fear should not be used, because fear is something illogical, not as the proposition said, because it's an automatic instinct that ancient that our that we used that our ancestors used to survive, not to.
POI.
I can't respond right now. Sorry. Then and it does not relate to logic because it's an automatic instinct. So, as my colleagues introduced before, our team is going to debate about that fear is not a legitimate tool for instilling moral values. So the first point I'd like to discuss is that if someone imposes moral values using fear, violence, and all that comes with that, people will never really assimilate them. As the proposition said. So fear is not something made for learning, it's something made for surviving. This fear-based social system, there are fear-based social systems that actually do not work. On a global scale, unfortunately, are a lot of governments that are adopting fear as a method, and dictators are one of them. As a political choice, they are a political choice. In history teaches us that roots of dictator, like the case of fascism, are fear, violence, and privation of freedom. That is a fundamental value. In dictature, the values do not exist because they erase them, so they do not instill anything but fear itself. Second, and just as importantly, as my colleague previously said, moral values are different for everyone. They change according to ethnicity, experiences, age, religion, gender, and a lot of other factors. So, for example, if we are from a country that believes strongly in a god or something else, should not be imposed to believe in what we believe. By that started a lot of wars and conflicts. Nowadays, in Russia and Ukraine, started because.
POI.
Yeah, I will respond.
Okay. Aren't you aware that the moral values that you are saying can also not be imposed with fear and can still be wrong, in your opinion, as you are saying things?
Yeah, they should they should not be imposed with fear, and they should not be imposed at all, I believe. If someone wants to understand a value, wants to get along with it, should it should be achieved by itself, not by being imposed by someone else. As I was saying, We have lots of conflicts nowadays at global scale. One of them is the one going on between Russia and Ukraine, and another one is going on in Palestine between Israel and Palestine. Um, so why they started in the Gaza line is going on because of a religion difference, and because and by an economic fact. Um, as I said before, most of wars begin from misunderstanding and by different ideals and values. And I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech that lasted 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, we can move on to the third and last constructive speech from proposition.
Yes, just give me a second, please. Okay, I'm ready. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. My name is Gino Ruopolo, and I'm the third speaker of Proposition Team. Now, as by my role, I will have to do some computation on what the other team has said, and most importantly, resume our clutch points together to bring a coherent vision of our debate. Now, starting from the top, the first opposition speaker has talked about how fear shouldn't be exploited as to impose values because everyone has different ones. This is a point that we'll also cover in the second part of my computation, as it was repeated many times by also the second opposition speaker. We want to answer then that since there are moral values which are considered more unanimously wrong, like killing someone, still there are some values that can be imposed through fear. But also, we want to remember an example that you made regarding the death penalty, which has also been answered by us many times. Indeed, you presented that the death penalty, as it has been removed many years ago from many of the modern nations, has instilled fear into the people of being maybe also wrongly accused of a crime they committed. We answered that technically we are not saying that the death penalty is the type of fear that we want to propose. We never said that fear should either be the only way to present someone the moral values. We just say that it's a legitimate tool. There could be others, as we'll say later. But also, reason can go through logic. As such, if we think about it, that penalty only brings terror into the people of lives, and we agree with that. But we're also saying that the death penalty should be removed and present with other terms of punishment for the people. For example, giving life in prison. In that case, the people will be less wrongly accused about this because they will be less incriminated by this, but also we will not face the government fearing the people's insurrection. Also, fear should never lead only to terror. Indeed, how can we say actually that fear should only lead to terror? Well, that's never a good thing. We should always remind ourselves that fear can be a passage through good moral values as long as it is accompanied by reason. Indeed, a parent should never just scold their child because they weren't good for something. They should sit down with them and explain them why what they did was wrong and instill in them fear about the consequences of their action. They need to feel the weight of the consequences of their action because only through fear we can really put the limit towards where a good moral starts and a bad moral starts. If we don't have fear, we may always live in serenity, in calm, in peace with ourselves, we'd be happy with ourselves. But through having fear, we would also know when our action will be going above and we going over what is considered actually good. Okay. We'll be going over what is actually good. If we don't have this link, this line that separates good and bad, how can we ever know that we are in the good? How could we ever be serene with ourselves? Serenity itself is a consequence of having fear because it is a limit that we impose to ourselves of where we should be happy with ourselves and with our actions or sad about our actions and actually repent the consequences. Also, you also talked about that fear shouldn't be used to teach morals in general, as never. We agree that fear as itself, as we said with the example of the parents, should never be used only by itself to impose the will of dictators, like you often mention fascism and wars in Ukraine and Gaza here and there. We don't really explain it, but anyways, we are saying that still the kids, for example, need to feel the consequences of their actions by accompanying their reasons with, by their accompanying their fear with reason. Because if not, it's just an unstilled fear. It's just something that he said that is wrong, and that's about it. But we need to remember that fear needs to be accompanied with the reason why we should be having that fear to build a better society. Also, you presented fear as should be at best a last resort. We want to remember that modern tools are not out of the question in our position, in our template. Indeed, we say that the teachers that, in general, teachers of life, also your parents, should sit down and talk with you. They shouldn't just hit you and pretend and make sure that you fear the consequences of your action. You also need to understand, as I said, why you fear those consequences. We want to remember that fear is not the only way, it's just one of the many legitimate tools. Also, you presented that some governments today have used fear. Like, for example, you made examples of someone going worse without really going into that. Today, I would answer that yes, of course, fear can also be used badly if not accompanied with reason, because in that sense, in that way, fear just becomes a power for becomes a tool for the for the powerful, for the ones in government, for the one that run a dictatorship. But we want to make sure that fear stays as a democratic force that one can engage through it with through with it with reason. Also, you presented that moral values aren't identical for everyone, as indeed they could change from in many nations, many continents, depending on gender, age, or ethnicity even. And again, we are not presenting in any way, sort of form, a rule book with the presentation of which moral doings are good or bad. We are just saying that fear can work because it can work, although it can be used badly if not accompanied with reason. Because again, dictatorships could make use of it by, and here I'm using your example even, could make use of it by scaring the people without any fundamental reason, or let's invent reason, but that wouldn't be real reason, and the actual smart people would realize that. Also, we need to remember that there was a second POI that my second POI that our second speaker made, and we would like to add to that that also we believe there should be an authority that at least guides the people into the moral doings of their action, whether that can be school teachings, whether that could be the prison system, whether that could be the legislative system of a nation. It still should impose fear as a reason. It should explain to you why that would be bad. And of course, it should be moderated precisely. It should not just be imposed like a dictatorship. Also, piggybacking on what we said on our third argument, we need to remember that humans themselves have come to the progress that they have reached to this day only thanks to fear. Fear is so important, it shouldn't be totally eliminated by the word that you are presenting, because After all, the only way that we have come to this progress is because intelligent men have weighed the decisions they could have done. They weighed the pros and the cons regarding the reason and the fear they had of failure. And since they weighed the consequences through the fear, they were able to make mostly good choices, bringing us into a new age, a scientific age, a revolutionary age, and progress keeps going forward because men are willing to go forward thanks to fear. Now, this was the end of my speech. Thank you all for listening to me.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. It lasted 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay, so if all of the judges are ready, we can move on to the last constructive speech of this debate, which will be done by the third speaker from opposition team. Whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, judges, opponents, and audience. Now we are gonna debate what the proposition team said, and we are gonna start by saying that uh, fear can help stimulate the reasoning, of course, but how can it be if fear is something that is I- that comes from our instincts and doesn't implies logic. For example, excuse me, uh, the morals can't be imposed if we don't agree with them in the first place. For example, during the Inquisition, the heretics weren't fully convinced with what the church said, but they were forced with the fear to retreat what they said in the first place, and their moral.
Why?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Why do you keep saying without a mechanization that fear is bad just because it is an instinct? Why don't you reckon that fear many times can be logical?
Okay, so I didn't say that fear is bad because it's an instinct, but I said that reasoning based on an instinct isn't really logical and is usually used just to save our life and not because we truly think that those values are correct. Now, fear can be used as one of the tools, but we have a lot of other tools that are more useful and that have less risk. So why should we use it in the first place? We can use a lot of why should we use fear when we can use education? And they also said that fear doesn't always implies death penalty, and but fear is always or almost always strictly linked to survival instinct. So death must be implied in that if it has to be really helpful or effective. Then fear does not respect the individual. because he doesn't have the freedom to have his own opinion. And so if he doesn't have his own opinions and his own values, he's just there in the society, existing, but without giving a real contribute. He's just there, fearing death with imposing values that he doesn't really follow, and that he will always try to escape from. Then we can say that basically fear has a lot of risk linked to its usage, as I already said. And in the modern society, this risk can lead to wars, conflicts that can be really dangerous for the world we live in. And
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Mar, are you saying that we should eliminate fear as a whole from the human being? I don't even think that's could be possible. I do realize that.
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
How do you think we could ever remove fear from human being? Because you're presenting a world without fear, without being used ever.
I'm not talking about removing, because it's part for it's essential for surviving. But I'm talking about using it, exploiting it for something that isn't always linked to survive. Everyone has values that are not always uh, are not always so mm, we can say also that fear can force us to do something, and even if it is a good thing, it has in the background bad emotion, and so even if we do good things, they will not have a positive goal in the first place. My speech ends here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. It lasted 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Okay, so if all of the judges are ready, we can move on to the reply speeches, starting again with opposition.
So, esteemed judges, opponents, and audience, let me recap our main arguments. To sum up, talking about the first point, we introduced the strong use of fear to impose moral values on the death penalty. That is the biggest fear that human can have. So, the second point that we firstly believe is about fear that doesn't help people to assimilate values. Instead, people that are under the control of fear tend to not assimilate these values, such as moral values, but to assimilate it in the wrong way. Another point that we take on the opponent side is that the moral values depends on a lot of other things, such as religion, gender, um, ethnicity, and we cannot say that explaining and impose moral values by fear it's a good thing, because I can believe that one moral value is good, but somebody can think that it's not. So we cannot use fear or other things to impose this. So other points that we discuss is that fear or everything it's not can be used, its fears cannot be used to grow children, because it's important not to force children with fear and to scare children in their growth. But it's important to support the respect and the talking with each other to understand what a moral value is. Another thing is that that we are talking that we talked about is about how this the fear is not a force, but it's only a bad emotion. Then we discuss about educational comportment is related to fear. So fears cannot be really be related with the educational comportment. That it's important not to link these two things. And I think that the evidence is overwhelming. So this is the end of our speech. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, jurors. Thank you, opponents. And that's all.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech that lasted 3 minutes and 50 seconds. And now, to end the debate, we will go on with the last speech, which will be the reply from proposition team.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges and members of the debates, we have finally reached the end of this session. Well, first of all, apart from thanking you all about this intriguing debate, I want to state the main 3 points of clash that, in my opinion, make it clear which side has won this debate. In this case, it is clearly the proposition side. Well, first of all, let me start by stressing the 3 points of clash. The first one being the use of fear from higher authority. The second one being fear and the effects on the individual, and the third one being the effects of fear on society as a whole. Now, let's first of all start by the use of fear from higher authority. We have tried to tell you that fear can be legitimized, whereas they have tried to convince you that we shall not use fear and use other methods, whereas, and we clearly agree with that, because we have said that fear should be legitimized but should not be used always. Then they stated many times with no clear explanation that fear cuts our liberties out, and many times that principles must not be there as a whole. However, we have said that there must be someone guiding us through our principles, because if not, there will be relativism, and that is why we have stated the 3 stages of understanding of an individual. First of all, we have stated about the individuals that do not have the capacity to reason logically. The second point being the people that can reason logically and are helped by fear, and the third one being people that with fear can develop logic. So what we are trying to say is that fear can be accompanied by logic many times, and the two things are independent. Moving on to the second point, where even if they have said that many times the humans will be in a condition of constant fear, of constant not well-being, we are saying that the serenity is a consequence of the breaks that are posed by fear. Fear serves, as we have said, as a break. And even if they have said that fear is a survival instinct, and without clear explanation, they've said that it is bad and that fear, something based on our instinct, is always illogical. We are saying that logic can be a part of our fear and can be a good part, because logic and fear just walk together and make us understand more why some moral values are indeed good. And in the end, the effects of fear on society, even if they say that our side is going to promote wars and conflicts because it's always dictators that use fear as their method of imposing moral values, and they say that their world is better because they have no fear-based laws and principles, indeed, they're just proposing a slower world, because, as we have said many times, the intellectuals and skilled individuals that carried progress during history were moved by fear in the first place as the very first motor. That is why we believe that fear it has to be legitimized as a method to impose to instill moral values, because in the end, let's now picture the two worlds that you would rather live in, judges. The first world is the opposing side world, which is a world that in the end just has slower progress in the best case scenario, because in the worst case scenario, the tensions that we have spoken about during our context are not going to be resolved by just methods without fear. We are saying that fear is necessary and it makes the world more efficient. We're saying that fear will accompany logic and will make people understand why some things are bad, even if they do not arrive to that conclusion with logic. So that is why we are trying to prove to you that fear and logic always walk side by side, many times walk side by side, and many times it can be useful to use logic or use fear as a method to impose. That is why, please, judges, accept our cry for a change, and that is why I'm proudly a member of Proposition Team. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that fine speech, and in general, thank you to both teams for the wonderful debate. So now we'll leave you and we'll return with the call.